Welcome to another video. In this video and in this section, we are going to talk about deploying code, which is a big part of our job. So the code gets deployed from environments to environments to environments, and our testing process is in that deployment. I'm going to explain what deployment is because that might be a new word to you. So we're going to talk about Git. Git is basically the main tool, one of the main tools we use in the process of deploying code. So we're going to talk about Git. We're going to learn what Git is, but first we need to understand what environments are. What are different deployment environments? So in this video, I'm going to explain what different environments are. I'm sure you have heard of them. You might not know what exactly they mean. So deployment environments are basically a version of the code that is available on a specific URL, right? You have your main website, let's say example.com. In this example, well, in this slide, we're looking at example.com, right? So typically you would know of example.com. That is the site that the public will access. But the people that are creating example.com, they probably have another version of it at a URL dev.example.com. Then there will be another version test.example.com, and there will be another version at staging.example.com. So those environments are typical. They're not the only ones. It can be many more. It can be less. Companies can have just the dev and the staging environments. They might have just the test and the prod environment. It all depends how the company decides to set it up. But typically, you would have these four environments, typically, in most cases, right? So production environment is the final environment where it has to be clean, it has to work properly. That is the environment where the public access it, right? So when you go to supersqa.com, that is the my production environment. When you go to facebook.com, that is a production environment, right? When you go to amazon.com, that is a production environment. That's where the customers see, that's where the public see. But before that, for Facebook, they would, I don't know, I never worked at Facebook, but they would have a different version of it at a different URL, dev.facebook.com or testing.facebook.com or qa.facebook.com or something like that. That will point into a different server. So what happens is you want to deploy the code. That's what deploy means. Deploy basically means you take the code from wherever it is stored in GitHub, most likely, or something like that. You take it from there and you put it on the machine where it's supposed to be executed, where it runs, right? The code by itself doesn't do anything. It has to run. We talked about that before. So you take it from where it's stored, you put it on a server to run, right? So that server basically is an environment. So you put it on some server, you test it out, make sure it works. Then you put it into the next server, which could be the production server, the final one, or in multiple stages. So in this slide, that's basically what I'm showing you is we take dev.example.com is going to point to a specific server. So I'm just going to show you 3 slides and I'm going to show you actual examples of that to-do app and different environments of that, right? So dev.example.com would point to a particular server, a particular IP address. Test.example.com would point to another server. And staging.example.com will point to another server. And production will point to another server. Right? And the way you usually protect it from the public is where there's a lot of different ways, but the public cannot access that. If you go to dev.something.com, they block that. So you can only access it from within the network, within the company's network. So on my job, when I'm testing that stuff, I have to be either at work, right? In the office physically, so I can use that network, or I have to be connected to a VPN. So they expose access to those particular sites from the VPN. So not the entire public cannot access it. Only people that have access can access it, right? So that's why you don't even know about it. That's why whatever your favorite website is, they probably have a dev version of it or a QA or a test version of it. A lot of times they call it a staging version that you don't even know about because you don't have access. But yeah, when you write new code, first you put it into a server, make it available, you test it, make sure everything looks good before you take it and put it into the production server, prod environment, right? So if you follow my advice and you actually start following people on social media that are into tech, doesn't have to be QA, but software engineering in general, you see a lot of memes about prod, the word prod. Oh, I ran a delete query in prod. Oh my God, there's fire behind him, right? So prod means production. That's the safest environment. You don't mess around in prod because that's where the public see. You don't make changes directly in prod because you can take down the entire site. And then you lose, like, the companies or websites that make money that have a lot of traffic. If the website is down for 1 minute, they lose millions of dollars, right? So you don't mess around with prod. You make sure everything is good to go before you put it in prod. So that's entire process of taking the code from where it is stored in Git, right, and putting it into the prod environment. That is called a deployment. You're deploying it or you're releasing it. Another word for deployment is release. So you deploy it to dev environment, you do what you need to do. You deploy it to test environment, you do what you need to do. You deploy it to the next environment, then you deploy it to prod. And throughout that process, we need to understand how that process works, because a lot of times QAs or automation engineers or SDETs, we kind of control, we manage that sometimes. Sometimes there's an entire team that manages it, but at least we need to know which version of the code is being deployed to which environment, because we're the ones who tested it. We are the ones who knows what part is tested, what part is not, what's ready to go, what's not ready to go. So we have to be the people that know which version of the code is deployed to which version of the environment. So that's why I'm teaching you this. That's why I'm putting this as part of this software testing fundamental, because we definitely get involved. Unless you're in a company culturally that all they want you to do is just test, you don't really get involved with the rest of the engineering, then you might not worry about this. You just test a specific thing, you let them know that it is tested, and they make sure it gets deployed to the right places. But from my experience, this is actually a major part of my responsibility to make sure the right version of the code goes to the right version. I want to make sure a code that goes to dev does not go to prod without going to test environment first and being tested, without going to staging environment and being tested in staging environment, right? So this is just another slide that just shows pretty much the same thing. So the first thing usually is a dev environment, and a lot of people are just checking in stuff into dev, right? Stuff that's not even tested once. So the dev environment usually is corrupted. It's really messy. It goes down a lot. It's just a messy environment. So as testers, we don't do a lot of things in dev. Developers do, because that's where the code goes first. We don't really waste a lot of time testing that, because we have to test it in the next stages. At least in the test environment, we test it thoroughly. So once it goes in the dev, maybe it doesn't even get tested. It just tastes it for a little bit, and it will go to the next stage. Usually it's test, right? And this can be a manual process. Somebody have to go and go to test. Somebody have to deploy to test environment, or it might be a CI/CD, continuous deployment, continuous integration. As soon as code is checked in, bam, 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 bam. All of this could happen automatically if it's a CI/CD pipeline. We're going to talk about CI/CD later on, because it's a big thing, right? So test is a little bit cleaner. Well, it should be much cleaner than dev environment. The code is already somewhat just been through some kind of basic tests. The developer at least looked at it in the environment. Then it goes to test environment. We do a lot of hard testing in test environment. Usually it's a much cleaner environment. So we basically run our regression test, our smoke test, all our automation. If you do manual tests, a lot of your testing also happens in this test environment. Then when everything is good here, you deploy it to stage environment. Staging environment is very much like the production environment. It's similar. It uses the same size machines, same resources. At least it's supposed to. Sometimes it even uses production database. The code might be new, but the database is production database, so you're kind of limited to what you can do. So you run basic tests in there, because the environment is just like prod. It depends on how it's set up. You might have to be a little careful. You might not, but you still do some basic testing. Then finally you deploy it to prod environment. Once you go to prod environment, of course, you're going to validate. You're not just going to say push and forget it, but you're not going to run as many tests as a test environment, for example, right? Like, for example, if you're testing login, every time in production, you're not going to create fake users in production environment. That's the real environment. There's a lot of analytics. There's a lot of government control side. If you're a public company, you can't fake number of users and things like that. There's a lot of things you can do, security issues. So you're limited to what you can do in prod, but still, you're going to validate, right? Make sure the page loads, especially non-destructive tests. A non-destructive test is basically a test that doesn't really change data. If I go and load the page, it's not distracting anything. But if I create a user, that's a destructive, because I'm actually generating data that is fake, right? You can still do it. There's ways to mitigate that. The analytics people can filter the emails you use specifically, like what you use a pattern or what kind of email you use. Then they can just filter that out. There's a lot of things, but in general, you don't want to do a whole lot in the prod environment, okay? So that's what environments are. Let's look at a real example of that. So I have this to-do app that I've created, right? So I didn't give it its own URL. I create a subdomain under my URL. So if you go to todo.spreadsquare.com, it might even be up by the time you watch this, but I think I'm going to take it down because I rent a server to run this. I literally rent a server. So let's say this is a production site, right? There's todo.spreadsquare.com. Then I have another version of it that is todo.test.spreadsquare.com. Then I have another version of it that's todo.dev.spreadsquare.com. Right now they look the same because they're running exact same code. But if I was to make a change to the code, the first thing that gets affected is the dev site. I should show you. I probably should show you another video, or I'll just tack this at the end because I have it all set up. As soon as I make change here, the dev site gets updated. Then I look at it, everything looks good. Then I didn't set it up in a true CI/CD. I have to manually go and click a button. Then that will go to test environment. Then the test version gets updated. And then finally, when I go press a button, the production version gets updated. If we were to look at those, just to show you those are different servers, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make a call and make a little quick command to see what the IP address. So there is this command called nslookup, or you can do ping. Ping is like you have to kill it. That's why I'm not using it. But if you do nslookup, all right, I just open the terminal. I'm going to copy this URL. Okay, that will give us the IP address. Oh, server can't find this. What do you mean can't find it? That is interesting. Let's see, without the HTTP, sometimes I know ping. Okay, there you go. It doesn't like the HTTP. So the test version of my site is at this IP. This is a physical server, right? Somewhere sitting there. I rented it. Now let's look at the same thing for the dev site. I'm going to copy this part. I'm going to ns lookup to do. Oops, I forgot the dot. todo.dev.spreadsquare.com. Look, that's a whole different IP address. This one is 137.184.119.89. This is 143.189.156.37. Different IP address. So they're different machines. It's basically what I just said here. I have the dev site that's deployed onto one server, and I have a test site that's deployed on another server. All right. So even my ecom site, this is the ecom site that's specific for my bootcamp. We use it in the bootcamp because I use a different version of this because I give the bootcamp students access to the backend, the API, the database, and everything. So I don't want to use demo store.spreadsquare.com because if we take it down, since everybody have access to the backend, then everybody that is not in the bootcamp will get affected. So I create a separate one. So even in that one, I have the dev version of it, and I have a staging version of it, and there's a production version of it, which is down right now. So that's why I'm not showing you. So every site would have different versions. So going forward, we're going to talk about how do you control this? How do you control which version goes into what environment? How do you use Git? How does Git help us with that? What is CI/CD, right? Even to Git is part of it, but the other tool we use, a CI/CD tool, is Jenkins. So we're going to have a whole section about Jenkins, just learning how to use Jenkins and everything, because as testers, as automation engineers, as SDET, we actually manage that stuff. We have to know how it works, okay? So that's what I got for environments. Hopefully that made sense, but it's going to come back. Whenever we talk about deployment, we always have to talk about environments. So it will make sense. I'll just bring it up, but I wanted to dedicate a full lecture specifically to show what environments actually are. Okay, that's the right English. All right, I'll see you on the next one.